if we do not learn the culture of peaceful coexistence, the world is going to face very serious problems. And as my friend used to tell me, Moratinos, who used to be the Foreign Affairs Minister of Spain, he said, no, 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 it's not the world that will face problems. The world will go on. The planet will go on. It's humanity. We don't want to save the world. We want to save humanity. We want to save human beings.
I'm standing here on the balcony of our hotel in Malta. The sun's just starting to rise here to the left. You see that kind of pale gold light, I mean amazing. You get that only on islands like this. It's lightening up the rooftops, these old defensive walls that you can see in the distance there, the dome. There's a certain atmosphere in the air, almost like the city is kind of holding its breath. It makes you stop, well, at least it makes me stop and think sometimes, about what this beauty is actually built on and the madness, the absolute madness that's going on right now in the world. Because while I am soaking in this magnificent view that you see down there, I'm also mentally preparing for my interview later today with Evarist Bartolo. That's Malta's former foreign minister. I've met him before. He's a serious man, thoughtful and very lucid on a number of global topics that most of our so-called politicians today really completely avoid. He's also one of the few who is not afraid to speak out about Gaza or about how diplomacy, global diplomacy, has morphed into this absolute grotesque theater of staged outrage, selective memory, and, I don't know, a realpolitik masked as moral superiority. So, for me, it feels a bit strange being here, because while Malta's celebrating Independence Day, 59 years since it cut ties with the British Empire, but colonialism elsewhere is really far from over. Keyword, let's say IMF, World Bank, etc. Now, how did the Maltese do it? How did the Maltese gain the independence? It's interesting because there was no war, no bloodshed, no revolution. They sat down and negotiated, quietly actually. They signed the papers and walked away from colonial rule. Well, kind of. It's not as black and white. It may have helped, of course, that Britain was basically bankrupt. What else is new? And simply no longer had the resources to hold on. At least that's what I understood. Try imagining that now. I mean, seriously. Gaza, Ukraine, Afghanistan. Not only the idea of a peaceful transition of power, but the idea of negotiations feel almost absurd. I mean, remember, under the Biden administration, there was no negotiations with Russia despite the US-led proxy war in Ukraine. I mean, you have to really comprehend this. But is Malta really clean? Not far from where I'm filming this, actually further to the right here, Daphne Caruana Galizia, who was, by the way, a personal friend of Evarist's, was murdered quite dramatically in 2017. They blew up her car. I mean, like in the movie. Incredible. Why? Because she asked the wrong questions. Too much digging. She exposed much about the toxic convergence of politics, dark money, and organized crime. She poked the wrong bear. That's what happens. And she paid the ultimate price. I mean, again, in this beautiful setting, how does this square with what I'm seeing right down there? So I guess that's the thing about this place. It's a mirror for world politics. You sip your coffee, you hear the church bells echo over the water in the morning, I mean, virtually. And for a moment, it really feels like the world might still be okay. But if you look a little closer, if you just shift your gaze virtually just a few degrees here to the right, and you start to see it, the scaffolding, the support beams of corruption, silence, and fear holding everything together in place. I can't help thinking that what I'm filming right now is more than, just a clip for later. It's a marker in time. Maybe conversations like this do matter, but maybe they shift something, or maybe they just drift out into the noise like so many warnings no one wanted to hear. Well, time will tell. One last thing, this interview runs for almost 2 hours. It's not for people scrolling on autopilot or looking for a quick soundbite. We could have chopped it into two parts, sure, but that would have killed the flow. This isn't a press soundbite or a TikTok clip. It's a long, unbroken conversation with space to breathe, to go off script, to actually think. That's why we kept it whole, because some subjects simply deserve time and some answers just can't be squeezed into, I don't know, 10 minutes without losing their soul. But if you're short on time, you can always pause, bookmark, and come back later, or simply jump to the sections that matter most to you. Before we now jump to the interview, I give you a couple of more moments. Maybe I will put in an evening shot.
Evarist Bartolo, what a pleasure meeting you again, this time in your home here in Malta. We have spoken before.
Welcome, welcome.
I'm very grateful that we had the opportunity. How are you?
Okay, and enjoying my retirement, doing what I like.
You're too modest. You're not really in retirement yet, but we come to this. We come to this later. Now, you were kind enough to invite us for dinner 2 days ago, so I know you're also a splendid cook.
I enjoy it a lot.
Where did this come from?
I think from my family, all my family, even though, I was born in the 50s. My father, I think, was not traditional because he helped with the cooking as well. So for us, it wasn't a model of the girls cook and the men do not cook. We were all, and I think practically we're a family of 7. Um, 2 before me died, so it would have been a family of 9. I think practically all of them, apart from one, I would say, all very good cooks. And we enjoy each other's food when we meet.
Yes. Now, I had the opportunity to look a little bit around the island, and it's almost a cliche, but it's really, really beautiful, right? On the flip side, I was made aware that there was quite a drastic event here in 2017 when a journalist was basically assassinated. As we discussed this before, this is still an open court case, but as far as you can tell, in a nutshell, what was this about?
Well, first of all, I think it's worth saying that this is the 3rd political assassination in 48 years. There was the daughter of a doctor murdered by a letter bomb because her father went to work in a hospital when there was a medical strike. That has never been solved. Has never been solved. Then the second one was a political activist in a club, and a Land Rover passed and shot at the club, and the bullet. They were not necessarily meaning to kill him, but a bullet pierced his neck, and that has not been solved. And then there was this. This, at least, the people have been brought to court, so that is a step forward. Obviously, what is worrying is that it's never, I mean, it's always terrible to have anyone killed, let alone a journalist, because it shows that there's something which is not working in a country, and I'm happy that at least the people have been brought to court, and I hope that this court case will throw the full light that needs to be thrown on a case like this.
As far as you can tell, and as far as you know, and I don't want to make this interview about this case, yeah, but was that more a criminal connection here, or was it a political background of this assassination?
Probably a mixture of both, as usual. First of all, I want to say that when it happened, I reacted to it, not just as a politician, because most of my life I have been a journalist and teaching journalists, including Daphne Caruana Galizia.
So you knew her personally?
Yes, and we knew her personally, even as a family with my wife. They used to go for walks with their children in pushing a pushchair, so there was that. Although she was a very strong critic, even of myself. So I still believe that is very important for us not to intimidate journalists through violence. I know that we live in a world where in 2025, last year, it was the worst year for the murder of journalists. About 142, yes, 2/3 of them in Gaza, unfortunately, but even the others in other parts of the world. So I definitely believe that for an open democratic society, journalists need to be protected. Journalists need to be able to say what they feel. There are different ways of shutting down journalists. The worst is murder, but then there's also other ways of actually buying them. I still remember in Italy somebody who is an investigating magistrate saying about someone telling him, there's no need for us to kill journalists or to kill magistrates. It's more effective to buy them, because like that people do not know, we do not draw attention to assassinations, and we can control what comes out in the media. So it is very important for us to come to the bottom of what has happened in this case, both for the political system, both for democracy and the media.
And let's stay with Malta for a second, but before I do, I should have mentioned at the very beginning, till 2022, you were the foreign minister of Malta, and before you have been minister for education, right?
Yes.
So I think this is important to highlight. So you actually were in the belly of the beast, so to speak, when it comes to international politics, and that's also interesting because Malta has compared to its relatively small size, disproportionate influence in international politics. And this is why mentioning you were really at the center of it.
Well, historically, the geostrategic position of Malta has always given it a role much larger than its size. Because if you wanted to control the route basically from London to India, you needed to control Malta. Interesting to find out that for the first, I think from about 1790 to about 1820, the British were looking for different islands to possess in the Mediterranean. And for them, the best one was the one that they took on this side of the Mediterranean, which was Malta. They tried to get other islands. At some point, they were even thinking of taking Sicily, but then they reached an agreement with the king of two Sicilies. So for them, Malta was very, very important. So the fact that Malta was so important has given it a role which has then affected the way political life is conducted on the island. And we have always taken initiatives that are larger than us. I mean, I think even the sheer work to become an independent sovereign country, a small country like this, which has very few natural resources. We need to import everything. I think we haven't been producing even enough food probably for the last 600, 700 years. As far as records have been kept, we have always had to import our food, mainly from Sicily, because the islands are so small. Very little part of the territory can be actually worked for agriculture. So it has been tough. And because the island has no resources, as people, we have had to get our living from the sea. Not fishing, but for quite a number of centuries, actually we were involved in doing the works of pirates. We're not supposed to use this word. We use a nicer word, no, which is corsair, because it was a trade which everyone was involved in, whether you were Catholic, Muslim, Jew, Orthodox, everyone was involved in the trade of piracy in the Mediterranean. And Malta had a very important part of its economy based on that, because basically what was the income of Malta for many centuries, especially under the Order of the Knights? It was the money that they were getting from the noble families in the continent who wanted their sons to be in the order, so they used to give parts of land, and with that came money for the Maltese, and it wasn't for the Maltese, but the Maltese obviously profited from it as well. And piracy, those were the two main activities that generated wealth. In fact, after the French Revolution, when the French expropriated basically 2/3 of the wealth of the order, it was gone. It was finished. So Malta had to find other ways of of living and existing, and it's been tough, but we've managed quite a bit, because if you take the Human Development Index of the United Nations, we're in the top 25, which is quite a feat for a country that till a few years ago, the only way you had to work here was either to work for the British services, some work for the government, but mainly a lot of people had to emigrate. I mean, I remember as a child in my village, practically every family had someone leaving. I mean, one third of the island emigrated in the 60s, and this has been going on for many centuries.
In regards to having its roots into piracy, Malta is in good company. I mean, Monaco is the same thing, right?
Yes.
But this interview actually is at the intersection between two important days. Yesterday, September the 21st, was the formal Independence Day from Britain. So 21st September 1964 was the formal independence. And coincidentally, and it has nothing to do with our interview here, but coincidentally today, apparently, multiple states have recognized, or will recognize later today, I believe, Palestine as a state. One of which is Malta, Ireland, UK, and?
Well, Australia, Canada, Belgium, quite a number of countries. Luxembourg as well. It won't mean much.
That would be my question.
It won't mean much in the sense that it's a little and too late. But better little than nothing, better late than never. But what needs to change now is what is going to be the follow-up. Because let us say that it is shameful that we as Europeans are among the last to recognize Palestine as a state, because it has been recognized by over 140 countries in the world out of 193 for a very long time. We are the last. So we shouldn't congratulate ourselves for doing this. The ultimate question is, what is it going to change on the ground? Because the way we have allowed Israel to expand in different parts around it has made the Palestinian state today not viable. Because apart from the fact that it has taken a lot of land, much more than it was thought in 1948, much more than it was decided in 1967. Israel has made it very clear that it never believed in a two-state solution. They always wanted to be on their own and push the Palestinians out. But now it's been worse, because not only do you take land, but the little land that you leave, on purpose, you isolate it from each other. So it's as if it's an archipelago of little islands, not in touch with each other, so that the state is not viable. Now, the issue is, okay, more states have recognized Palestine, because this is what the step means today. As we're doing it, we think we're doing something great. But it has been done by others before us. So the issue is, what is going to happen after this? How are you going to ensure that there is enough land which is touching each other, next to each other, so it's both Gaza, the West Bank, and East Jerusalem, to make it a state? On purpose, a few days ago, the Israeli government launched a new project which cuts between the West Bank and East Jerusalem, to make sure that even there it's not possible to simply go from one place to another. So the question is, what is going to happen after this? How are you going to change the reality on the ground? Because a Palestinian state, any state, needs not only a declaration of recognizing it, but then it needs land.
Borders.
Where is the land?
The definition.
That will make it a state. So there's still a lot of work to be done.
Yeah.
At the same time, it is shameful, the double standards of allowing a genocide to take place, and then talk about human rights, about democracy, about the rule of law. It's terrible.
Yeah, I fully agree with you here.
Terrible.
But my question would be, was there any kind of definition in regards to what exactly those countries recognize? I mean, what is it?
There is talk of recognizing the 1967 borders, what happened after the 1967 war. So that at least would be something. I mean, it's not what they lost in 1948. But the issue is it going to happen? That is the real test. Now the real test is, okay, you've recognized it, now you can have an embassy, now you can pull the flag up. It's good, but that is just the beginning.
Is it not also, I mean, I completely agree with you, it's way too little and too late. But is it not also an indication that the global sentiment vis-a-vis Israel is shifting?
And you know the one who said it recently? Somebody called President Donald Trump. He told the Israelis, well, you are winning the war in Gaza, but although even that is questionable. What do you mean by winning a war? But you're losing the global war for the hearts and minds of the people. There are whole sections in whole countries who would have never thought of turning against what is happening in Israel. But now they are doing it because it's too much. I mean, the official figure is 64,000 killed, but that is just the official figure. It must be over 200,000.
Yeah.
Because when there was the Lancet report establishing it at over 100,000, since then, I'm sure it's gone over 200,000.
Indeed. I hear a number between, I know those are extremes, between at least 200,000 up to 600,000, somewhere in this.
That's why. So you know, and human beings are human beings, whether they are Palestinians, whether they are Israelis, whoever they are. I mean, the people who were killed on in October 2023, on the 7th of October, those were people, and we should feel for them as well. But then you can't say that for every person killed on that day, you kill 60, you kill 100, you kill 200. And this was declared. And this is where I find the European leaders very hypocritical. Because on the 8th of October 2023, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was already declaring that he was in favor of a genocide. He actually quoted
Amalek.
The Bible, Amalek, and say, go in and destroy their children, their wives, their animals, destroy everything, you know. So that was, at the same time, you had European leaders saying, we know that Israel is democratic, they will not overdo it. You know, I mean, I remember Chancellor Scholz saying this, and other foreign ministers also saying the same thing. That's terrible. And it has been a big blow for the credibility of the European Union. Definitely.
It's easy to forget that we, the West, we comprise about 16% of the world population. Nevertheless, we think we still can rule the world.
Yes.
We did it, as we, the West, kind of subjugated the world for 500 to 600 years. And we're now at the tail end of this Enlightenment period, in quotation marks.
Well, you know, it's we have to unlearn colonialism. And colonialism has to be unlearned, both by those who were colonized, but also by the colonizers. And I think sometimes it's difficult for both of them to unlearn colonialism. But we definitely need to unlearn colonialism, and we need to unlearn Eurocentrism. We think we're the center of the world. We're definitely the world, how it's being shaped now, shifting, and the European Union risks becoming even more irrelevant than it already is. It's already irrelevant, and I'm not saying this simply to say it. 2 years ago, Josep Borrell said it when he was talking to the European diplomats. He told them, you know, there are two big challenges facing us: irrelevance and being, you know, criticized for being hypocrites and double standards. He had in his last year, he had the courage to say.
I think it's clearly demonstrated by recent actions from other negotiations, if you can call it that, between Russia and America. The Europeans were not even sitting on the table.
No. And then when they sat in front of the desk of President Trump, it was pathetic.
Ursula von der Leyen, when was it? Not a couple of weeks ago, Ursula von der Leyen had this kind of negotiations on behalf of Europe with Trump. It was an absolute disaster.
And what is interesting there, apart from it being criticized by quite a number of leaders and politicians, I mean, including people who were Commission presidents, like Romano Prodi, actually said that von der Leyen was the sheep, the lamb, and President Trump was the wolf. And he said, in politics, you can't afford to have a relationship between the wolf and the lamb. But apart from that, surveys that have just been carried show that over 2/3 of the European citizens feel that that was a terrible deal, and that von der Leyen did not protect the interests of the European Union. It actually shows, and it's happening in other regions of the world, that former allies within the West, whereas the West for quite some time was a bloc and working together and pulling together, even that is falling apart. And we have to see what happens in the relationship between the EU and the United States. At the same time, what happens regarding Japan, what happens regarding Australia. The biggest challenge of the European Union is to unlearn colonialism, to unlearn its dependence on the United States, and to learn how to live as partners with China, with India, with Russia, with the United States, with Indonesia, with the rest of the world. How can it change so many centuries of the culture of domination into the culture of coexistence? If not peaceful coexistence, at least coexistence. Because we know that in the world of atomic bombs, it's either coexistence or no existence.
Keyword: atomic bombs. Saudi Arabia and Pakistan have just signed a defense agreement?
Yes, a defense agreement.
Right? In consequence to Israel's attack on Qatar.
So, the first thing that we need to clarify is that they have been working at this for many months. an agreement like that doesn't happen in a few days. And we need to understand well how much it's going to evolve. We have to take it seriously. There is an invitation for others to join it in the region. Will it change the reality in the Middle East and in the Gulf countries? Because for many years now, for the last even century, the way Britain, France, the United States control the region, making the region vassals, even when they were given independence, even when they became states, you have the reality of the leaders and the people, and the leaders believing that the only way they can stay in power is to be on good terms with the United States, with Europe, with Israel. There is that reality. When we say how late we are to recognize Palestine, okay, the countries in the region have recognized Palestine, but substantially, what have they done to help the Palestinians? It is so tragic. I can tell you, a few months ago, there was a ship with weapons and armaments going towards Israel, and it wanted to use Malta. We said no. We said no. I was happy that we could say no. Which was the country that let it in? Egypt. And the same can be said of United Arab Emirates and of Saudi. You know, if these countries want to take strong steps in support of Palestine, they can do it. They are not doing it. You know, a lot of declarations that the Palestinians are our brothers and that it's terrible what is happening over there, you know, from a lot of leaders, even in the Islamic world, not just in the Gulf or in the Middle East. But then concretely, what do they do? What might change things now? Now, this is interesting, and the fact that you mentioned the attack on Doha is important. How far will that change the dynamics in the region? Because that was shocking. The leaders there were shocked because for many years they thought that being the allies of the United States, with Qatar having the largest
US Army,
US base in the region, usually you say, you know, it's good to have them as allies because they protect us. They didn't protect them. So it's going to be interesting. And what we need to watch is Iran, Saudi, Iran, China, Iran, Russia. How that is going to start changing, if it will evolve. Also, it's good to look at how the different countries have started diversifying even their weapons purchases. Because if they start buying weapons not only from the United States, because once you buy weapons from a country, you become dependent on it, not just for the hardware, but even for the doctrine, even for the technology, even for the policy, even how to make it work. If they start diversifying and buying from other countries, like China, for example, and Russia, then that is already a different scenario. Ideally, they shouldn't be buying armaments because what the region needs is development. And it is so tragic to have a region with so much wealth, with so much resources, and still it needs a lot of human, social, economic, and political development. And the issue is, will they ever find the ways to work together, build a common cooperative security architecture, and develop institutions like the Gulf General Council, GCC,
yeah.
and other setups like that to work together, because so far it's a lot of history of being turned against each other. That is, I think, one of the biggest challenges they face.
You just said that countries who actually should put the money into development put money into weapons. Now, in the case of Pakistan, Pakistan is a poor country, but it has a nuclear program, a nuclear weapon. And that brings me back to the question, this security alignment between Saudi Arabia and Pakistan as a nuclear force. Or shall I say this? I mean, we all know that Israel is a nuclear state. Is there any serious, I mean, from Israel's perspective, is it now becoming more difficult for Israel in terms of creating a greater Israel or whatever, because you have suddenly a nuclear armed force, not only having nuclear weapons, but potentially, I mean, Saudi Arabia could buy all of Pakistan, right? Potentially also selling them to other countries.
Yes, but unfortunately, the last 40 years of our history shows that the best way for you not to be invaded is to have nuclear weapons.
A la North Korea.
So the message has been that.
Yeah.
If you are Libya and you have just said you are going to disarm, the following year you will be invaded and destroyed. Iraq, it's the same. It doesn't happen to North Korea for a very simple reason, because they have nuclear weapons. So this is the perverse message that is passed to countries. No, have the best guarantee for you not to be invaded is not to live with peace with others and allow them to live with peace with others, allow them to enjoy their resources, because I think ultimately this is the issue. You want their resources, and that is why you want them weak. That is why you want to remove those leaders who say, we have the resources here in our ground and we're going to use them for our people. And we have histories in the last 70 years of leaders who have been assassinated, coup d'etats, for the very simple reason that the West have wanted to control their resources. So if you say, yes, come and take our resources, you are okay. If you say no, they will create trouble for you. So now the issue is this. I have attended quite a number of conferences in the region calling for a nuclear-free Middle East. It would be such a good development. But this is again the hypocrisy and the double standards of the West. Helping Israel to become a nuclear power, but then if someone else tries to become a nuclear power, like Iran, do all you can to destroy it. So this is very, very sad. The best outcome for the region would be not to have nuclear power, not to have nuclear weapons, because I think it's debatable. I know some people consider it controversial, but I think nuclear for Pacific, for peaceful use, for development, I think is important. I think it's important. But then to say, listen, yes, Israel, which is not even a member of the agency, of the energy agency, and does whatever it likes. You do it, you allow it to do whatever it likes, but then you try to destroy others who want to be the same.
Yeah. You briefly mentioned colonialism, and I would like to come back to that, because on a surface, very superficial, it seems colonialism kind of is a thing of the past. But if you really look at it, the mechanisms have changed. Now, from the past, an example from the past, I interviewed John Perkins, who is the author of the book An Economic Hitman. And in this book, or also in this interview, he described how he was sent to countries to talk to presidents and basically, how shall I say this politely, coerced them into accepting loans from the IMF, from the World Bank, whatsoever, in exchange for raw, cold resources. And if they said yes, exactly like you said, if they said yes, they survived. in many cases, if they said no, they got killed. There's a whole string of political assassinations, as you already said. So John Perkins was from the past, but as far as you can tell,
even today, first of all, I feel qualified to talk about colonialism because I come from a small country that if you take its past of 8,500 years and you compress them into 24 hours, we have been independent for the last 10 minutes. Now, political independence is important. Having your flag, playing the anthem, having your head of state, that is important. But is it enough? Unless you take the decisions that you need to take in your interest, then you still remain a colony. You might be called an independent state, but if you are made to participate in rules that apply only to you and to those who the powerful, especially we're talking about the United States. Basically what we're talking about now is, what is the order that emerged in the world after the Second World War? It was a world shaped by the United States and the International Monetary Fund, World Bank, the Financial Action Task Force, the United Nations and the Security Council. All those were institutions that did not reflect the future. They reflected the past, and in fact they helped to make sure that the past continues. Let's remember that 100 years ago, there were only 50 states in the world. 50 states. Today there are 194 now. 194.
Which is 194?
Because we were 193, and with Palestine, it will be 194.
You're ahead of me. Yes,
okay?
Absolutely.
Now, what has happened to the 144? They had to abide by the institutions and within the institutions that you are working. So, if you are the leader of an African country, as John Perkins has experienced personally, they will come to you and tell you, you need to do this, you need to do this, you need to do this. What is the result? They take your resources, they do not pay taxes, they say that they are giving you aid. If we were to analyze how much aid is given and how much illicit money is taken from those countries, more is taken than is given. And again, you want to make sure that you divide them against each other so that Africa, for example, doesn't unite. The same thing happened for the colonies. When in 1955 they met in Indonesia, in Bandung, it was the first time in human history that it wasn't the kings meeting, it wasn't the powerful people of the world meeting, it was actually those who were just being liberated, like Egypt, like Indonesia, like India, like China. They came together and said, now we will create a world which will be, for our people. They didn't say, we want to create a world which destroys the United States, or which destroys France, or which destroys Britain, or destroys the Soviet Union. They say, we want to develop our people, our country, for our people. But don't make us, you have to be with the United States against the Soviet Union, or with the Soviet Union against the United States. And there was Sukarno, who was at that time leading Indonesia, who in his naive, when we read it 70 years later, his speech saying, history is on our side. We want to do good things for our people. So if we go to these big powers and tell them, just leave us in peace to develop for our people, I'm sure that they will do what we tell them. And we know that it didn't happen. So colonialism is still there, but it's changing. It's changing because you have today those countries that met 70 years ago in Indonesia, and at that time it was talking, wishing, dreaming, now it's much more than that, because the power is shifting. So you have, for example, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, SCO. You have BRICS. You have the countries of, Brazil, China, India, and now they are moving much more than that. Russia, United Arab Emirates, Iran.
They have so many.
So now the shift is happening. Again, they say we're not doing it against others, we're doing it for our people. And first of all, let's remember, as you said earlier on, that the West is just 14% of the population of the world. But it's not just the numbers. Now, if you see how the economic growth of the BRICS is, and the GDP, of the global GDP, it's greater than the G7. What is also very interesting is that the balance of power is changing also technologically. I will just mention a study that is carried every year by the Australian Social Policy Institute, which they call the Technology Tracker. They study 64 technologies that you need for the 21st century. China is leading in 57 of them. India is leading in over 45 of them. The United States has lost its historical advantage. Europe is leading in 2 of them. So when you see how this is changing, actually what is happening is, and at the same time, I have to say it with a smile. Recently I came across an interview that President Nixon gave to Time in 1971. And he said, it's very dangerous for the world to be dominated by one power. It's not good to have the United States all-powerful. It's important to have Russia, China, India, to mention, so that you have a balance of power. But whenever those powers have tried to become powers in their own right, that is why now we are at a dangerous moment. Because if those who want to dominate want to continue dominating, and those who were dominated do not want to continue to be dominated, that is the tension that we are facing now. Can we manage it without wars? Because without military wars, because trade wars are happening. Information wars are happening. Hybrid wars are happening. The military warfare is so far restricted to some areas on the globe. Is that going to expand? Now that is the danger. Because the wars are there. The trade wars, as we said, all the other wars. It's the continuation of war by other means. The world war is happening already. Will it be also military globally? That is terrible. I hope we don't come to that.
America tries with all might to prolong, as long as possible, their hegemonic interests. And at the same time, they're seeing a decline. We can see it in financial, economic, ecology, everywhere. The only field where America still is powerful is the military. Now, there is a strong argument to be made, and I've discussed this on a number of occasions, that America might feel it has to use military force in order to maintain its hegemonic superiority in a world where, admittedly, even by America, the unipolar moment has ended. Yeah, and I believe even Trump made references to that, not even wanting to be the global policeman anymore. Yeah. So there are shifts, and that vacuum that a declining and an inward-looking America creates will be felt by others. Is that not a logical consequence? And in as far, in your point of view, could America really use its military force and might to kind of prolong its It's hegemonic.
But it's coming against limits as well over there. Eh? On the surface, it seems that there is still this belief that the United States is number one militarily. Even that is being questioned today. There is no doubt that if you look at the budget, and I have read your studies in this area, which shows how, in the case of the confrontation with China, the United States is preparing actively, not just in terms of how much it spends and on what it spends, but even infrastructurally in the territory around China. And I found it a fascinating study. And it's really worth reading carefully and analyzing it. But even that is coming against limits. Seems that what we're seeing happening in Ukraine, because in Ukraine it's a proxy war. It's not a war between Russia and Ukraine. It's a war between Russia and the United States.
Fully agree.
And NATO fought in Ukraine, and the terrible losers.
Till the last Ukrainian, it was said by Americans. Yeah.
It's terrible, because those are brothers, if not brothers, cousins, killing each other. So it is a tragedy, because it is also a sign of how you do not resolve how to live together. Because one of the root causes there is that you have a country which is called Ukraine, which had different ethnic minorities like Russian Ukrainians, Romanians, Poles, Hungarians, and ideally, and I mean humanly, I even hate using the word ideally, is to have these different cultures and different languages respected and living together in the same society. Why should you be considered second class if you speak another language? So that is one of the reasons. Why can't you practice your religion if you want to practice that religion? So that is one of the root causes of the war there. But then the other root cause is you want Russia to be submissive. It is so sad that even going back, 30 years, even more than 30 years, and again, one of the roles that Malta played in this global history was that President Bush and President Gorbachev in '89 met in December, met off Malta in the sea near Malta, and came to this island. There the promise was on the part of Gorbachev saying, we are not going to impose our system anymore on our allies. We should work to live together as Russians and Americans. From the part of America, the promise was, we will not take advantage of what you're going through, and we will not threaten you. We should try to find ways of living together. Unfortunately, that did not happen. I don't think that there was an intention not to enlarge NATO. From the classified documents that I've followed, I would say even in the last 50 years, this is when the OSCE was being set up at that time as CSCE, which is the Conference on Security and Cooperation in Europe, and then eventually becoming the Organization for the Cooperation and Security in Europe. That should have been the way taken, no? Because like that, Gorbachev was talking about having a common security home from Portugal to Russia, from Lisbon to Vladivostok. What does that mean? If we are living in the same house, we have to respect each other, and we have to take care of our house because it's a common house. But the Americans were not interested in that. They wanted to enlarge NATO, and they wanted to use the European Union against Russia, because they can only take a defeated Russia. Yes, they can live with a defeated Russia, a Russia that does
what they want it to be. Come and take our resources, come and invest here and take whatever you like. That is a Russia they can live with. A Russia which is sovereign and independent and looking after itself, no, they can't. They can't take Russia as a partner, as an equal partner. And that is sad. That is sad, because how can we have peace? How can we have peace in Europe, which is part of Eurasia? Because that is why it's important that we do not see these regions in the world as isolated. From our point of view, we're not only the center of the world, but, you know, Russia and the others are on the periphery. From their point of view, we are at the periphery. You know, it's when you have the whole continent of Eurasia. We should. That is one way of living together. If we have these, you know, these regions working together. But unfortunately, that is what happened in Ukraine. Now, the way the war is moving ahead, and with the kind of weapons that have been sent by the United States and NATO, the technology of Russia has prevailed. Has prevailed, not only in terms of weapons that have been developed and which the United States and the NATO does not have, like hypersonic, like Rearranging, and also, but in terms of the military doctrine. From what I understand, now, at the beginning of the war, the Russian military had developed a doctrine based on the technological development that they can feed into the same system to coordinate what happens in the battlefield, what they have in space, what they have on land, what they have in terms of drones, what they have in terms of AWACS, and build that information in real time to be able to see how they're going to move forward. At the beginning of the war, it was 8 minutes, the time that it takes for them to gather this information, process it, and take decisions on how to move forward. Now it's less than a minute. Now that is something, because they have learned it in the real field, unfortunately with so many thousands killed, that the United States and the NATO are not like that. And at the same time, especially when it comes to Europe, they are facing huge problems, because even the United States has deindustrialized. Even Europe has deindustrialized.
Especially Germany.
Germany. And young people, because they have lost also trust in the leadership and in the system, are not ready to go to war. Germany is struggling to find young people to be recruited into the army. They want so many thousands, and very few turn up. So that is another important issue. Now, what makes this worrying is that this inequality in military technology might make you resort to the ultimate weapon. Now, that is where we are, I think, where it's worrying, because so far it has been possible to escalate without going to the nuclear option. Now, if that is reached,
as a glass ceiling,
will we break the glass ceiling and go to the nuclear option? And that is terrifying, because there are some who say, I would rather die than live together with you as your equal.
Yeah, that's, I mean, that's the Samsung option again, coming back to Israel. But I think it was Lindsey Graham in the US who advocated the use of strategic nuclear weapons. Strategic meaning smaller, yeah.
No,
but they're not that small.
No. This is this. What makes this worrying is that for the last probably for the last 3-4 years, we have tried to normalize nuclear weapons. We have tried to say they're okay. Now, who has profited a lot from this?
the illusion that you can buy a nuclear bunker. So if you see the industry that is producing nuclear bunkers in the United States and in Europe, the amount of rich people, because you need to have lots of money.
Exactly. Mark Zuckerberg has a massive compound.
Yes. And giving yourself this illusion that you can survive, and they are making millions. They are making millions. And ironically, some of them are buying spaces in the former nuclear bunkers that governments in the 50s and 60s after Hiroshima thought that they could build nuclear shelters for their people. They gave it up because they knew that it was spending a lot of money for nothing. Because if you have a nuclear war, somehow or other, you're going to be affected and you will end up in a terrible catastrophe and devastation. Now, normalizing it by having this kind of industry which is really making a lot of money, selling nuclear bunkers. But then normalizing it by saying, oh, you can have a limited effect. We can use tactical nuclear weapons and, they will change the reality on the battlefield, but they will not affect the whole world. But even that is a very dangerous illusion, and it is really playing around with people. I saw a confidential report prepared about, I would say, probably 70 years ago in Malta. What happens if the Soviet Union dropped an atomic bomb on the Grand Harbor of Malta? Now, why would the Soviet Union be interested in dropping an atomic bomb? Yes, it would be interesting then, because Malta was a strategic logistical center for NATO and for American Sixth Fleet and for the British forces in Malta. So if they wanted to take out the NATO southern flank, they were not going to bomb Malta because of the Maltese. And that is why, through that, we know that for us it makes sense not to have military and naval bases and not to form part of military alliances. And we are not part of military alliances. The study carried out by the British government at the time said that half of the population of Malta would die instantly, and the others would die a few days, a few weeks later. Yeah. So, it's very dangerous to give this illusion that, oh, yes, and usually who comes up with these ideas? People who have never been to war, people who have never seen young people die, people who have never left their office, people who are paid handsomely by the military-industrial complex. What President Eisenhower warned us of in January 1961 in his farewell speech, when he said, he was telling the Americans, for the first time we have a military-industrial complex. America did not have a military-industrial complex before. It was only built during the Second World War when civilian industry was changed into military. He said, its power is growing and it is a threat to our democracy. If he were to come today, 64 years later, he would be shocked because his warning was not given any
He would turn in his grave. He would turn in his grave.
And today, Mick has become Mickey-Mat, which means that it has become not only the military-industrial complex, but it's Congress, it's the entertainment industry,
media,
it's universities, academia, it's the media, it's the... If you were to see the millions of dollars that the military-industrial complex gives to think tanks that then advise the American government or appear in the Senate for hearings about the security and defense policy,
They are paid by the military-industrial complex. They produce reports and talk about the need to spend more and more and more. And this is a problem that the United States has, even for itself, not just for the rest of the world. Because it spends a lot of money in the defense industry, which are wasted, not even in its own interest, because quite a number of schemes that cost billions are never actually developed for what their purpose was. So spending less would be good for the United States as well, and I think for the whole world.
It's a tricky proposition, because the debt of America, I stopped counting, is in the trillions, and it's an exponential growth. I mean, they have the advantage, of course, the two advantages, I would say. They have the petrodollar, and of course they have the capacity, thanks to the petrodollar, to print in quotation.
That is changing as well.
Print in quotation marks, because these days they don't print anymore. It's just a couple of more zeros on the computer. But even that will not sustain.
No, that is changing.
America.
That is changing. New research has come out that even the SWIFT system,
which is now replaced by,
it's declining.
Yeah.
It has declined by about 15%.
Yeah.
And what is interesting is that when it was proposed, this is before 2022, when it was proposed to see how you can try to crush Russia by leaving it out of SWIFT, the persons who were proposing to do that, they were already saying, let's be careful, because we will need to replace it with another system.
Which they're doing.
Because what will happen is that if we push countries out, they will set up alternative systems. So now the dollar is losing its hegemony. These international payment systems created by the West, by the United States mainly, are losing their control, and the BRICS, China, Russia, and others, are not only using a different international transfer system, but most important of all, and this is part of their sovereignty, they are using their currency. Why can't we, if you are Brazil and I am China, and if we are trading, we can trade with goods, which is a barter agreement, but we can also trade using each other's currency. So that is another area where the hegemony of the United States and West is declining. And it also shows what happens when you have sanctions, when you try to cut off countries from systems. Like, for example, what happened with the United States, saying we don't want to give China microchips anymore. What happened? China developed and is developing its own microchips.
And very good ones.
So, cheaper and very good ones. And it seems that we do not learn. It seems that those who propose sanctions, apart from the fact that a study that has been carried out in August, published by Lancet as well, the medical journal, actually says that those sanctions, which were against countries hitting their trade, hitting their food, has actually resulted in the killing of millions. Who are hurt? The elite. If I'm a president of a country and you are taking measures against me and sanctioning me, I will be the last one to suffer. It's the people, the workers, the people who suffer, because at the same time that you are sanctioning these countries and these elites, you are taking their money to deposit them in financial services in London, in New York, and in other places, and allowing them to circulate, because you still want to use their money and have them as funds in your financial centers.
We know from Madeleine Albright that America is not against putting extreme suffering on other people. I mean, between the First and Second Gulf War, and I think it was on CNBC, Madeleine Albright was asked if she found it justified that 500,000 Iraqi children were starved to death.
Yes.
And she said her first instinctive reaction was, yes, I find it justified. Yeah.
But this is terrible, because this is what also, it's that kind of mindset which is allowing the genocide to happen in Gaza.
Exactly.
Because you're saying, I am white, okay, I'm a male, I'm Christian, I'm Western,
Superior.
I'm a human being, I'm superior. The others,
The outgroup.
Indians, Arabs, those are part of the outgroup. They are less than me.
Yeah.
They are not human beings. So once you dehumanize others, then you can bomb them, you can kill them, you can do whatever you like, because they are not humans like you. And this is the basic, I see that the biggest, if I were to really simplify in one sentence what the biggest struggle is at the moment, is by those who still believe in the culture of domination and of being superior, and those who want not to become superior themselves, but to live with others. Peaceful coexistence. This is the biggest clash that I see.
Because you said the decline of American influence. Now, Saudi Arabia, we talked already about the Saudi-Pakistan Defense Pact, but there's more. We have, of course, the Saudi Arabia and Kuwait have now started to ban Israeli passport holders, which is, I believe, just a cosmetic kind of gesture. But overall, the kind of moving away Saudi Arabia from the sphere of, or at least trying to move away from the sphere of influence from America, and being such a crucial ally, historically speaking, basically from day one of Saudi Arabia's existence. What does that tell us in regards to, and we could even throw one more thing into the pot, the China brokered Saudi Arabia-Iran agreement. So again, we have Saudi Arabia at the center of a number of these kinds of new constellations.
I think it's interesting, and it's interesting to see how it's going to develop. I think it's still too early to predict and say, this is what Saudi is going to do. Why? Because Saudi is caught in the old world of
clerics.
US domination, you know, and Israel through US domination, but at the same time wanting to move away. Now, signing an agreement with Pakistan is taking a step to try and loosen that strong control. Working with China to reach an agreement with Iran is also very important. That is also loosening that control. A big step would be when Saudi Arabia decides to join BRICS. When Saudi Arabia decides to join BRICS, then you know that they have taken not half a step, not a part of a step, but they have taken a step which shows that the room for them to take sovereign decisions has increased. Will they get there? We have to see how things move, because they will move at the regional level, they move inside, because we must always remember that the relations that countries build with other countries depend also a lot on the dynamic of what is happening within society. So it's the changes that are happening within Saudi Arabia as well will be part of the changes on how it relates to the rest of the world. But what seems to be the case now is that whereas before it seemed as if Trump was not going to have any problem with having more Abraham Accords with other Arab countries, now those seem to have been frozen, at least when it comes to Bahrain and when it comes to the Arab Emirates. With Morocco, it's a bit different, perhaps also because Morocco is not geographically close to them. So we have to see how things are developed. I think we have to see, to follow closely more what is happening over there, not through our eyes. Yes, we do it through our eyes, but I think it would be good if we have a bit of humility
and try to find out about them from themselves, and also from what, for example, the Chinese say, the Russians say, the Indians say, the Brazilians say. We have to learn. One way of us learning to look at the world with new eyes is to look at the world through the eyes of others as well.
Maybe a simplified question, but would the US allow Saudi Arabia to exit the influence sphere of the US? I mean, we know the CIA has a proven track record of regime change.
No, it's interesting. It's interesting that you're using again the phrase which we have not used for a long time, sphere of influence. We had, we thought that with the collapse of the Soviet Union, the end of history, and we were all going to live happily ever after, only if we imitated everything that the West does, but at the same time remain inferior to the West, because the West wants the rest to be like it, but not to be equal, to be like it, but inferior. Not because when, and again, I take it from a small colony like us, we learned the values of sovereignty, liberal democracy from Britain. So when we went to London to negotiate, what did we want? We want liberal democracy, we wanted a parliament, we wanted to take decisions like the British take decisions about themselves. No, you must not threaten our military interest in Malta. So again, this goes to the sphere of influence. There is no doubt that the United States will do all it can to keep Saudi Arabia within a sphere of influence. But we learned that even that spheres of influence are not necessarily cages. They are not rigid cages. They are strong, but depending on the leadership of the country, it can try to enlarge the room for maneuver. Now, this is where a multipolar world, I think, helps. Because if you have a unipolar world where power is all concentrated only in one capital, and everything depends on that capital, it's very difficult for the subordinates to move. If you have different power centers, if you have different poles, then you can say, listen, I will buy this from you, but this I need to buy from. I have oil. No, I'm going to sell oil to China. I'm going to sell oil to India. This idea of having a sphere of influence which is totally against others and which is totally within one block doesn't work in reality. I was shocked recently to hear people like Lagarde and Janet Yellen saying the days of open trade are over. We must now trade only with a basket of narrow friends who share our values. It's not even possible, even if you want it, which doesn't make sense in a world which is interconnected. How are you going to have the resources that you need from countries that share your values if they do not have those resources? How are you going to have the supply chains? How are they going to provide the markets for all your products? Especially when then you have an agreement like what Trump has been signing with Canada or trying to sign with Canada, with Japan, with the European Union. When it's totally, totally unequal, it's what I want. My goods will enter your market free of duty, but you have to pay 15% to come into my. How can you justify that if you're doing that with your allies, with your friends? These are the basket of friends that you say you want to trade with. So that is why the world is really at a moment of change. And as moments like this, we do not know exactly how things are going to be aligned, but definitely things are changing. It reminds me of about 100 years ago, the theologian Bonhoeffer was giving a speech in Spain, and he was telling his people, you know, this was between the two wars. The first war had disrupted the world as they knew it, and he said, you know, the carpet has been pulled from under our feet. You know, he said the bourgeois parquet actually has been pulled from under our feet. We are still trying to look for a piece of land which is firm, so that we know what we are seeing. We have left the land. We're going out in the open sea. We do not know what we're going to find in the open sea. We are at a moment like that.
Good. We have already covered quite some ground. And with your kind permission, I would like to continue in a slightly different direction. Let's look at the combined effects of economic downturn, civil unrest, and the rise of populism slash authoritarianism, because those two are connected. In brackets, we could also put another element in migration, because there's some overlapping effect, so to speak. So where would you like to start with those?
All those factors go together, because the rise of populism is because the traditional elites have let down their people. Why do you have a crisis of social democracy, a crisis of Christian democracy, a crisis of all the traditional parties in Europe facing a crisis? And apart from the parties facing a crisis, is the actual system itself facing a crisis. So it's
define the actual system. What do you mean with actual system?
Which is the democracy, which is the party system, which is elections, which is voting for the government that you feel you want, still believing that democracy is by the people, of the people, for the people.
You did not include the economic side of it.
And you know that, first of all, if parliamentary democracy and freedom is to mean only voting every 4 years, voting every 5 years, that's very limited. That's a very limited idea of democracy. If we really want democracy to be effective and relevant for people, it has to follow not only political rights. That's important. Political rights are very important. But so are social rights. So are economic rights. How much is it satisfactory that you can vote every 4 years, every 5 years, but then you find it very difficult to pay the bills, you find it very difficult to find a job, you find it very difficult to find a house, and to have a life which gives you dignity?
And if the votes have no effect?
No, because then, to make it worse, if there aren't policies that deliver these social and economic goods, then you say, what is the political good? What is it serving me? If I vote, but then I don't see any improvement or I don't see any benefits in my life, in my daily life. And that is, I think, one of the biggest crises facing, you know, if we take the European Union, we have 35% of the population of the member states of the European Union who find it hard to make ends meet. These are Eurostat statistics. One can go, it varies from one country to another, but to have more than 1/3 of our people saying that they're finding it hard to make ends meet shows that our system is not delivering. And people are going to decide on the relevance of democracy and politicians and political parties on the basis of how it improves their daily life. Now, we are facing a very difficult period when, just take the two main member states of the European Union, which is Germany and France. They are in deep economic problems. When you see France, it has also huge political problems because it's not governable. You have the left, which does not have enough support to form a government, an alternative government. The right does not have enough support to form a national government. They are not ready to work together to have some kind of coalition to bring France out of the present problems. Macron's central bloc does not have enough power to run the country. He does not respect the choice of France citizens because he appoints one prime minister after another, which then comes to parliament and loses its votes of confidence for the budget. In Germany, like in France, you have the government saying, in France it's serious because, again, public debt now is over 113% of GDP and the deficit is about 5.8%, saying that the social system in France is not sustainable. In Germany, Chancellor Merkel is making the same argument that the social system is not, the social services are not sustainable, the welfare state has to change. But then, to make it worse, at the same time, these leaders are saying we need to spend more in the military. So how are you going to persuade these citizens to say, I do not have enough money for your pension, I do not have enough money to fix the bridges, to make the trains work properly,
Healthcare.
for education, for healthcare. No, we don't have enough money for that. We are not producing enough wealth to sustain our social model, created by the failures of the establishment. I have people, for example, in Germany, who get upset when I say this. I say, listen, those are the consequence,
The logical consequences.
the logical consequence of the failures of before. If I have not managed to somehow or other deliver, others will. Others will, even if they provide an illusion, because this is the accusation then that is thrown at populists and others, that they are good in opposition at saying, oh, this is not working, we need to do this, we need to do that. But I would say that the distrust goes deeper than local elites. Because if you have created a kind of global neoliberal policy, where, go back 17 years when we had the financial crisis. So you have money for the banks, but not for the citizens. You have money for the military, but not for the citizens. So we have not learned from the crisis of 2008. I remember at that time attending conferences and meetings in Brussels, when we used to say, and even in the last 12 years, because as Minister for Employment I used to attend the Social Affairs Committee, where we used to discuss welfare and employment and social services, we used to say we must not repeat the mistake of 2008. Because in 2008 the message was, we need austerity. We need people to tighten their belt, because we need to save the banks. It seems we have not learned, because I remember at that time, and then under Juncker,
the document of the social pillars of the European Union came out, when we used to say we must build the European Union from the ground up. We are having policies not because those policies are what the European Union needs, it's what you need. What do you need in the social services? What do you need in your daily life? And we will design our policies according to your needs. Now it's as if we want to build the European Union from the roof down. Now we know what happens if you build a house from the roof down. It will collapse and it will hurt the people living there. If this present trend continues, and with the present leadership it seems that it's going to continue, we are going to have bigger problems.
Is the rise in populism, actually, I see it more, there's a rise in, no, there's a trend towards authoritarianism, which is preceded first by populism. So is populism not simply the democratic immune system's response to this failure and economic betrayal from neoliberalism?
But also then, so-called democratic governments, even today, while scaring people from the populists and telling them they will take away your rights because they are against diversity, they will take again, because they are against civil rights, they are against equality. Then these same governments, in the last few years, have taken steps to crush freedom of expression. If you come out to protest in favor of Palestine, you are even arrested. We had in Finland, we had a funny episode. It was comic and tragic at the same time, when someone who is a Finnish candidate for the European Parliament was heckling Ursula von der Leyen while she was talking. He was telling her, why do you want to take us to war? Why are you having this agreement? And she was telling him from the stage, in another country, you would be arrested for trying to stop me. At the same time, the Finnish police were arresting him.
Took him out.
Yeah. So I want to say this as an illustration. It's a very dangerous time.
I agree with you. With someone who publishes on a number of platforms content that is critical of the mainstream narrative, I've experienced this firsthand. From shadow banning to my Twitter account has been suspended on some vague justifications. Yeah.
But this is why today, when we talk about press freedom, we started the interview talking about the important role of journalists and press freedom. But there is so many different ways of killing a journalist. You can kill a journalist not even by murdering that journalist. If you can, shut him up or exclude him, send him to the periphery. So it all shows, I think, that these rights that we have acquired are not acquired once and for all.
No.
It's a continuous struggle.
On the contrary, I would even argue they're being piece by piece taken away.
Dismantled and broken down,
So the institutions that uphold those rights, they're undermined.
Yes.
More and more rights are being taken away, sometimes by unelected officials like Ursula von der Leyen and Kaya Kallas. I actually made a piece about Kaya Kallas, which circumvent completely any kind of democratic oversight.
So, in fact, it shows that there is a link between the international law and the international rule of law and domestic law, that they are infecting each other. It's not only the international law and rule of law which is in crisis, but even in different member states, in different countries.
Agree. So what I'm observing, that's just my personal observation, is an orchestrated attack on, let's call them, civil liberties. Now, if we think this through, and we don't need to go into specific countries because I see it everywhere, even in the Netherlands, where where we go from a free society more and more into, I don't even know how to call it. Many people quote 1984 as a reference.
Some are calling it illiberal democracy.
Illiberal democracy. Okay. And the spearhead of this all, of course, is the US, where we clearly see indicators. I mean, we have a president who already showed that he was willing not to accept the outcome of an election with all kinds of things. That people wonder how many terms Trump might do. Yeah, I don't know if he can pull this off.
But what is interesting over there is that we used to look at the United States as a model for the separation of powers. That you have a system which is balancing each other. You have the judiciary, you have the legislature, you have the media. So you have the three branches of government, but then you also have the media, and you also have civil society, which is very important. That is being lost. That is being lost also in terms of a legal doctrine, talking of the unitary power of the president, as if the president is an emperor. But again, I see this not happening only in the United States. It's happening also in other countries. And it's happening, I think, also, especially I think in the European Union, because there is a clash between the European Union as being a unitary setup or being a union of member states, of an intergovernmental setup. There is a pressure for more power to be taken from national governments and from member states and to put it into Brussels. Now, governments come and go, elections happen, governments change, but the bureaucracy in the European Union is there, becomes stronger.
The unelected democracy.
And in some cases, and sometimes it is considered very exaggerated to talk like that, the European Union starts looking like the Soviet Union. When you have a strong center, without any sensitivity on how it is affecting the member states, taking decisions at the center, even when you don't have power to do that. One of the deep criticisms of von der Leyen with Trump was that she started saying, we're going to buy so many billions in terms of armaments. We're going to invest so many billions. We're going to buy. She does not have the power to do that, whether you agree with it or not. She is not a head of state, but she behaves like the head of a superstate. And that, I think, puts the European project in a deeper crisis.
Not only that, on the eastern periphery, you have a serious, let's just call it, difference in opinion in regards to, let's just say, the war in Ukraine, like more Western European countries.
Yes. I can tell you from my own experience as foreign minister, attending the foreign affairs minister meetings in Brussels, that I could tell it even though it was happening obviously before, because these countries joined the European Union before I was there. They dominate the agenda. If you were to analyze the agenda of the foreign affairs ministers since the Eastern European countries and the Baltic countries joined, it is dominated by what's happening in what is called the Eastern neighborhood. Do you hear the European Union talk about Africa? Do you hear the European Union talk about the Mediterranean? So with some of my colleagues, the Italian and the Spanish, it was very difficult to actually try to put on the agenda issues like what's happening in Libya, what's happening in Egypt, what's happening in Africa, and that we need to build a good relationship with Africa. No. Most of the attention was drawn to Russia,
and China, China, China. And having such a big continent as our neighbor, it's as if it was far away. So yes, and you remember at one point the United States was very happy with this, talking about the old Europe and the new Europe.
Exactly.
And the new Europe was those
Eastern.
who want us, to be with them. Because one thing that needs to be studied is that if you were to study the European Union from the point of view of those who set it up, the European politicians who set it up, who had very good relations with the United States, the United States considers the European Union as a foreign policy tool of the United States.
Absolutely.
Like an inferior NATO. So the kind of agreement that was signed, it's not just a matter, I would put it beyond the weak character and personality of von der Leyen and the strong personality of Trump. Okay, personalities are important, but the unequal relationship of lord and vassal has been there for a long time.
Definitely, since the Second World War, no question.
So you know.
Yeah, I mean, it's even stronger than that. I mean, the geopolitical nightmare, and again, we both know that, yeah, but the geopolitical nightmare of the US is simply German know-how and Russian resources combined. Means kind of a European, Central European, alliance, which would be much stronger than the US. So there would be no US hegemony with that kind of power.
Yes.
And if you think about it logically, it's almost absurd. Why would we not want to have peaceful relations with our big neighbor to the east, full of resources, full of everything? The religion, the culture.
You can study the documents that were being prepared for the foreign policy of the United States after the Second World War, even by people like George Kennan, saying at all costs we must keep the Germans and the Russians apart.
Separated.
Apart. And they did not like it when people like Willy Brandt tried to, to heal the divide.
Aldo Moro.
You have a whole Olof Palme. You have a whole list of people.
Just a side note: Aldo Moro was assassinated. Olof Palme was assassinated.
Yes.
They shared similar views vis-a-vis the US.
Yes.
Hint.
Yes. And I like a lot a character who is Enrico Mattei, who was a businessman in terms of the oil industry in the 50s in Italy, who wanted to build equal partnerships with the North African, Middle Eastern, Russia and China. And he had contracts which actually expressed this equality, not 70-30%, but actually 50-50, and transfer of training and transfer of technology, because he used to tell them, those resources are yours. Let's work them together, but let us respect you.
It didn't
Coincidentally, he was also killed.
There's a whole string.
He also died.
A whole string of political assassinations. Because you mentioned Libya, and I know that you were quite engaged when it came to Libya. Correct me if I'm wrong, but if my information works out, then you were invited by the Italian Prime Minister to help with the negotiations with Libya. Maybe you can, as a segue into the topic of Libya, maybe you can tell us something about it.
Libya has always been very important for Malta. We are neighbors. We've had thousands of Maltese over the centuries, even the last 2 centuries, living in Libya and having a decent life in Libya. And then they helped us even closer when we were negotiating a new agreement with Britain, so that we will not have any naval and military bases anymore in 1970s, starting 1972.
So after the independence in 1964?
Yes, of course, of course. Because with independence, the British still had naval bases here, and NATO had a base here and had its headquarters without ever having an agreement with Malta. Because they said,
we have an agreement with Britain, you are part of Britain, we don't negotiate with you, we negotiate with Britain. You know, this is where democracy and security, foreign policy domination collide. And we know who's the weakest partner. It's democracy, which is the weakest part. So yes, Libya has been important for us. I think it was a tragedy what has happened over there. Still, it's a tragedy.
Define, when you say what has happened, please define.
Remember that when Libya was, so for many years, Gaddafi was criticized for being a threat, for being undemocratic, for being a dictator, for supporting terrorism, you know, for using migration against Europe, and for, you know, for becoming a threat because he might want to develop nuclear or chemical warfare. When he started wanting to agree not to have chemical weapons, and when there was the famous so-called Arab Spring, and a revolt started in Libya, there was a decision by France, Britain, and even the United States to go in. And
without UN mandate, right?
Yes, without obviously.
Which makes it actually a war crime.
Illegal, which makes it illegal. But this contempt for the United Nations has been also quite regular. If it's convenient for us, let's go through the Security Council and use the Security Council. If we think that we're not going to get what we need in the Security Council, let's do it without the United Nations. Let's do it our way, the way we want it. And Libya was bombed and Gaddafi was removed. And since then, Libya has been, again, not one country anymore. You have a Western government, you have an Eastern government.
You have slave trade.
The South, you have. So you know, you have millions coming or were in Libya, and then being, it's a kind of a modern slave trade as well, using you know, the routes and having people traffickers in Libya. And you can't have them only in Libya. You must have links in Africa, and you must have links in Europe as well, you know. And so we, especially when I became minister, for me, the first 3 months of me being a minister, I think was the most difficult time in my life. It was quite traumatic, because we had 2,000 migrants arriving here every month. Now, 2,000 is 2 million in Europe, if we take the perspective. Here we had at that time about 450,000 people. If you have 2,000 coming in every month, by the end of the year, it would have been 24,000. Now, I was caught between the need to defend my country at a time when COVID was happening. There was talk that thousands were ready to leave from Libya to go to Europe. Most of the time they don't want to come here. They know it's a small country, but it's on the way to Italy geographically. So we have had incidents where people have come here and they stand at a bus stop and ask, which is the train to Rome? Because they think either that they've arrived in Lampedusa or that they've arrived in Sicily. This used to happen before. So I had to take steps to talk to Tripoli, because most of them were leaving from Tripoli in our case, to please take steps not to allow these boats to come here. I was criticized for being, and for me, I can tell you it was traumatic, because I know that these are human beings. These are people who suffer. I used to tell my European colleagues, please help us out. We can't take all these people on our own. So that is why I found a common position with Italy, because Italy was in the same position.
They are closer to Libya because of Lampedusa, the island of Lampedusa. They are close to Tunisia, and quite a number were leaving also from Tunisia. So we used to work together, and we used to travel together. Foreign Minister Luigi Di Maio and myself, we used to travel together to see what we can do. But for me personally, I can tell you it was traumatic, because you know that you can take decisions where people are dying. People are drowning in the sea. So for me, it was terrible. I can tell you, for those 2 months, 3 months, because then the situation eased. And I used to tell people, we cannot. I understand that they want to move, but as a small country, we cannot take them. And there hasn't been any solidarity from the European Union. They never accepted the fact that let us share this
I have a
burden.
very simple solution.
And I remember once having a very friendly agreement discussion sort of, there was no agreement actually, with the Danish minister, because there was a ship of the Maersk line having about 70 migrants near Malta. They had picked them up, and they wanted to bring them here, and we said, no, we cannot. And Denmark told us 70 are too much for us. I mean, to have Denmark tell Malta that 70 are too much for Denmark, it shows you that there was no intention of solidarity or sharing. What is tragic, again, about this issue of irregular migration is that here is the European Union facing a deep demographical crisis, where the fertility rate and the birth rate is going down, and in the next few decades the European Union is going to lose something like 75 million people within the working age. It needs people, but at the same time, culturally, it is considered a big problem to accept these people. And this is I think this is one of the existential challenges that the European Union will face in the coming years. It has already started facing it, together with the other problems that we discussed. Immigration is an existential challenge for the European Union, because how is it going to operate whole sectors of the economy, whole sectors of society, if it doesn't have enough manpower to make them work? They are not going to come from within. The birth rate is not going to increase. AI and robotics, however much they develop, they cannot replace human labor, human work, especially in certain areas. I can tell you, if we just take the plane now and go to southern Italy, just an hour away, you will find fields and fields and fields which are empty, because the farmers are old. Their children have moved north, and they don't want to do any farming or any agriculture. And the fields lie empty, but no, we will not bring migrants to work in these fields. So Europe has to decide what it's going to do. If it doesn't face this challenge intelligently, it's going to suffer. And I can tell you, one thing that really shocks me even now, when I think about it, between 2013 and 2020, when we used to have meetings of the Social Affairs Committee, we never discussed migration and employment. Then, in the period of 2 years as foreign minister, we were all the time discussing migration and security. Nothing to do with demography, nothing to do with employment. This kind of paranoia, I think it's also an indication of the Europeans not managing to live with diversity. We don't want these people here, because it will displace us, it will change us, we won't be the same again. Now, I understand that is difficult. Because one of the tragedies when we discuss this topic is that I take the side of the migrants and you take the side of the natives. No, we need to do them together because the natives are right. You cannot simply give up your identity, you cannot simply give up the space, you cannot simply give up this place. At the same time, those who are coming also have to make cultural compromises to live with others. They can't simply behave as if they are still in their own country. So creating a society which is multicultural and multi-ethnic is more of a challenge than a monoculture and a mono-ethnic society. But we need to do it because otherwise, if we not do it with less workforce, the economic decline of the European Union will accelerate even more. And I think it will become more of a stagnant economic area than a prosperous, dynamic, future-oriented area.
There are a couple of things in regards to migrants. First of all, I have the strong indication that certain political interest groups use migrants as scapegoats to kind of distract from the real problems, number one. Number two, I have a very simple solution for migrants. If country A bombs, starves, represses country B and causes migrants, then this country has to take the migrants. Yeah? So it's a kind of ironic, how shall I say this, ironic justice almost, if people who were colonized for a couple of hundred years by a country, let's say Britain, now go to Britain.
But even now in the present, I used to discuss with my African colleagues. So, the kind of agreements that the European Union has with Africa, let's give the idea of Africa. Why is Africa important? Because we will soon reach the stage where there will be 5 Africans for every European. You can imagine what that is. If things do not improve in Africa, what are they going to do? So, how are they going to improve? One way of things improving here is to help, not to help them, not to assist them, not to give them aid, but to have a dignified, equal partnership with Africa. So, what do we do now? We tell them, send us your coffee beans, but we want it only as a primary product. Send us your raw materials. We don't want you to send us a manufactured can of coffee. No. You send us the coffee bean and we manufacture that. Now, how are you going to create jobs in Africa if you're only going to give them the role of providing your raw material? We rediscovered Africa after not having oil and gas from Russia. We said, we must go to the Gulf, we must go to Africa now to have new agreements with Tunisia, with Libya, with Algeria, with Morocco. So, so what you say is very important, and it's still happening today. If you do not build these kind of partnerships, you're not going to have economic development. And what happens when so many millions of young people are coming on the job market and they don't find jobs over there? So I agree with you that that is an issue, but then you also need people in your country to make your economy grow. I also agree with you that there are people who find it very convenient there's not even need to instill fear. We already have fear of someone who is different, of someone who is other. All you need to do is, instead of discussing it rationally, say, emotionally, they are the problems. Yeah. They are the problems. We must keep them out. They are the problems. So, that we need to face these things.
Evarist Bartolo, you were very generous with your time. Before we conclude, is there any topic that's close to your heart that we did not scratch on today?
No, I think we touched a lot. I will repeat something that I said before.
if we do not learn the culture of peaceful coexistence, the world is going to face very serious problems. And as my friend used to tell me, Moratinos, who used to be the Foreign Affairs Minister of Spain, he said, no, 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 it's not the world that will face problems. The world will go on. The planet will go on. It's humanity. We don't want to save the world. We want to save humanity. We want to save human beings. And unless we develop and cultivate the culture of peaceful coexistence, we're going to have serious problems. Now, that is not easy, because it's an act of civilization. I think war is natural. Hostility is natural. Hate is natural. It's an act of civilization to say, wait, let's stop. What's your interest? Why are we fighting? What is your interest? What is my interest? Can we find ways of working together? Now, is it possible that in the West we are incapable of finding mutual solutions? Let's go to China. Confucius, years ago, used to say, centuries ago, used to say, let's have exemplary competition. We can win, both of us can win. There's no need for me to trip you up so that you lose. I don't have to be the number one. Can't we be the number one together? Which means that we will work together, we will prosper together, we will live together. Is it at all so difficult for us to accept that the rest of the world can be our equal partners? Do we have to dominate? Is that the only way we know how to deal with the rest of the world? That is not possible anymore. We'd better learn it, that it is not possible anymore. But to try and extend it, are we ready to go to war? Are we ready to move towards suicide? And I think for us, it's either peaceful coexistence or suicide. Why should we choose? Why should we choose to destroy ourselves?
Very wise words, Evarist. I really thank you for the opportunity talking to you here in Malta, in your beautiful home.
Thank you.
And I will do my best to spread your message.
I think of my granddaughter, who is going to be 10 years old soon. And I ask myself, she will be alive in possibly 80 years' time from now. And so, 2105, how will the world be then? How will humanity be then? I hope it will still be here.
Very good question. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.